Something happens in Ultimate Spider-Man number 7. Yeah, I know that's not a really high bar to set for a superhero comic book, or a story of any kind, really. But some months it feels like this book has trouble meeting that bar. And it's only been 7 issues. It's a little bit early to be having that problem, don't you think? The upside is that what does happen in this issue is pretty cool. They do something villainish with the Green Goblin. But yeah, I can still feel myself kind of starting to turn on this book. And I'm not trying to, it's just, it feels like there's a pacing problem. This issue also gives us more gratuitous expository tech talk, this time with Otto Octavius. In fact, I think that's the name of his podcast, Gratuitous Expository Tech Talk with Otto Octavius. Jonathan Hickman, our author here, is good, but he really likes having his characters explain comic book science and technology to us. I mean, like, he really likes it. To the point where you're kind of like, okay, dude, zip up. I've seen enough. Spider-Man, Shadow of the Green Goblin, has largely felt like a masterclass in Spider-Man storytelling, so I was sad to see it end with issue number 4. The art on this book has consistently been really strong and really richly detailed. We also have a Norman Osborn that, for my money, looks a little bit Defoe-ish. The story takes place less than a month after the murder of Peter's Uncle Ben, but we have an older, seemingly present-day Peter Parker as our narrator, and that's a really cool storytelling perspective to take. But yeah, this story had action, it had high stakes, it had emotion, it had drama, it had heart. It's only 4 issues, but it checked most, if not all, the boxes. This would, hypothetically, be a really refreshing issue to read if just prior you had read another Spider-Man comic that spent a lot of time needlessly on long expository tech talk. Just saying. Love Me, a Romance Story number 4, wraps up a miniseries that asks pertinent questions about artificial intelligence and whether robots are coming to take our women. Nah, I'm just kidding, it's not about that at all. I don't feel men as a gender should feel threatened by AI in that way. Although I hear those Snapchat bots are pretty good listeners. I'm making jokes here, but Love Me has actually been one of my favorite comics of 2024 thus far. It actually turned me on to Mad Cave Studios as a whole and a lot of the great stuff that they publish. When I got to interview James B. Emmett, the editor for this book, he mentioned that Love Me is really the brainchild of Stefano Carticelli, who is our artist here, and this book really turned me on to Carticelli's work too. What he turns in here has a great look to it, a great feel, a great texture. I'll be keeping an eye on him in the near future. This book is also much more violent and, I guess, action-oriented than I thought it would be. That's not a bad thing, it's just a thing. I was really worried coming into this issue that they would pull the rug out from under Jojo, our robotic main character. Like he's trying to rescue this girl from the mob, and I was worried that the girl would either turn on him or put him in the friend zone. The latter is sometimes more painful. I'm not going to tell you whether that happens though, because I really think Love Me, a Romance Story is worth your time. So if you get a chance, check it out. In Batman 151, the Dark Knight recruits Catwoman to help him steal an alien supercomputer which makes a noise like a microwave. So yeah, we're still tied in with Absolute Power here, the big event comic that DC is doing right now. Part of that story is that our big villain, Amanda Waller, has something called a mother box. It's a miniaturized kind of supercomputer from the hellish world of Apocalypse that allows her to do various horrible things. and in this issue, Batman recruits Catwoman to help him steal it from her. Historically, in the world of DC Comics, when a mother box does something, it typically goes ping. I can't even tell you how much it amuses me that an alien supercomputer makes the same noise as the dirty microwave at my Joe job. I can't really complain much about this issue. I maintain that an absolute power tie-in is really not what the Batman ongoing series needs right now. For my money, the book really needs to work on redeeming itself after the Joker Year 1 storyline from earlier this year. But this story is fine. One thing I will say though, and I don't know if this is an element pulled from the Catwoman ongoing series, or if it's something that this book created, but this issue makes a point of telling us that Catwoman has a hideout that she calls the Drawer. Like as in a drawer, you open, put something in, and then close. The idea is that Selina Kyle had a cat when she was younger who used to hide in a drawer. Thus, her hideout is now called the Drawer. I'm just going to say it. In my humble, respectful opinion, that is a really bad name for a hideout. I mean, it's not as bad as Litter Box would have been, but it's just a couple degrees above. Batman also gets a souped-up suit of armor for this mission, which is kind of redundant, isn't it? I mean, the Batman costume is often portrayed as armor, isn't it? I mean, isn't that like putting a hat on a hat? We also get a Harley Quinn backup story in this issue where she prevents a nuclear power plant from melting down at the hands of the Riddler. I don't dislike Harley Quinn, I'm just not as in love with her as a lot of other people are. But nonetheless, you know what? This story was charming. It actually was the highlight of the issue for me. So, there you go. Hal Jordan's wacky shirtless prison break adventure continues with Green Lantern number 14. So much like books like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, Green Lantern is tying in with the Absolute Power event comic that DC is doing right now. Rather than focus strictly on Hal Jordan, though, this Green Lantern title is casting a wider net and checking in with multiple different Green Lantern-associated characters. So last issue, for instance, we weren't just with Hal, we also checked in with Sinestro and Alan Scott and Jessica Cruz, etc., etc. Speaking for myself, the constant perspective jumps last issue were a little disorienting. This issue still does it, but it does it less, so it feels a little bit more focused. It's also worth noting that this issue is tied in pretty heavily with Task Force 7 number 3, the single issue of that book that our author here, Jeremy Adams, also wrote. So if you want some background on what's going on in this issue, I would recommend you check out that issue as well. One thing our author Jeremy Adams has been consistently good at has been remembering to keep these stories fun, or at least to have an element of fun present. Case in point, in this issue, Hal Jordan has to fight off an Amazo robot, a really powerful robot, to break out of this prison setting, and he gets to use various weapons and artifacts from around the DC universe. It's a fun, kind of light-hearted sequence. I enjoyed it. Incidentally, our penciler, Fernando Pasarin, really draws Hal Jordan with like a shredded physique in this book. I'm a big believer in the notion that superheroes should not all look like competition bodybuilders, but for some reason the shredded look works for Hal Jordan. I'm not sure why. But the most intriguing and compelling part of this issue, at least for my money, is what it does with the Alan Scott character. In taking Alan Scott's powers away from him and imprisoning him, one of the Amazo robots has apparently gained free will. That's an interesting direction to take an Alan Scott story, given the character's backstory of being a closeted gay man. I admit I might be reading too much into that, though. I just really loved Alan Scott the Green Lantern and have been dying for more Alan Scott content since it wrapped up. So I appreciate Jeremy Adams incorporating him into this story. It's not an easy time to be a Power Rangers fan right now. I mean, we can be real about that, right? I thought Power Rangers Cosmic Fury, which came out last year, was about as good as the show has ever been, but it did kind of have a cloud hanging over it because we all knew it was the last season of the show as we knew it. And since the show ended, it's kind of been a steady stream of outrages and facepalms. Like we had Austin St. John potentially trying to profit over a t-shirt with a Hitler quote on it. And then news broke about Hasbro auctioning off 30 years of props and stuff from the show. That was kind of depressing. And then a few weeks ago, Hector David Jr. got into some legal trouble for pushing somebody over a parking spot? But in an era when it seems like the world is going out of its way to beat up on Power Rangers fans, Power Rangers Infinity #1 from Boom Studios is a really fun burst of silly, ridiculous optimism. Largely the kind that the brand is associated with, quite frankly. This issue, which is double-sized, about 40 pages, is about a Power Rangers fangirl who becomes part of a misfit team of Rangers, basically, who are taking on Poisandra, who is a villain from Power Rangers Dino Charge. And they really are sort of misfit, bizarre Rangers. One is a cheerleader, one is a pirate, one is a middle-aged woman who likes drinking tea, and one is a polar bear. The art and the colors here have a tremendous energy to them. It doesn't look like the show, but it kind of has the same feel and vibe as the show, if that makes sense. Our author here is Sam Humphries, and when Sam Humphries goes for sentiment, he can really hit the nail on the head. Case in point, Sam Humphries is actually the author of my favorite Green Lantern comic of all time, Green Lanterns #15. It's about Jessica Cruz dealing with anxiety. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. And by the end of this issue, the prevailing sentiment seems to be that if you love something and you put your heart into it, it can last forever. And that's an important message, I think, for Power Rangers fans to hear in 2024. Wolverine Revenge #1 is an excuse for Greg Capullo to draw Wolverine and other Marvel characters and things. And that's about it. Greg Capullo has had a pretty storied career as a comic book artist. For the past 15 years or so, he's gained a lot of notoriety as a Batman artist, primarily working on projects that Scott Snyder has written. Wolverine Revenge represents his return to the Marvel side of things, and they give him a lot to work with, not just in terms of Wolverine and Wolverine-associated characters, but various characters from around the Marvel universe, including at least 2 A-listers. But my issue with this issue is that it feels very thin from a story perspective, kind of slapped together for the express purposes of allowing Capullo to draw Marvel stuff. It's a post-apocalyptic alternate universe book about Magneto wiping out a big portion of Earth's population, and Wolverine and a bunch of Marvel heroes dealing with the fallout from that. By the end, Wolverine is put in the role of sort of the vengeful hunter, and kind of as the title suggests. And I might add that a bunch of those Marvel heroes that are in this book that Capullo gets to draw kind of go out like chumps. Wasn't really a fan. But if you're picking up this issue to see Capullo work his magic, he doesn't disappoint. I'm not knocking him. He also gets to draw dinosaurs in this story via the Savage Land setting in the Marvel Universe. Greg Capullo draws a mean dinosaur. I have a vivid memory of opening up one of the Dark Knight's Metal issues and seeing an image of Batman riding a Velociraptor-type dinosaur that he drew. So he knocks that out of the park. I think I was just hoping for something with a little more substance and meat to it from a story perspective. If I'd known what was going to be in this issue, for a $5 cover price, I don't know that I would have picked it up, if I'm being honest. If you're looking for something Wolverine flavored that has a little bit more substance to match the Flash, I would check out Wolverine Deep Cut. The first 2 issues are on the stands now. And you know what? I also had a lot of fun reading Deadpool and Wolverine WW3. So I would check that out too. This issue has a red band variant cover. It's basically the A cover, but with some blood added to it. Ooh, edgy. I don't know, that's not that bad, is it? I mean, if Wolverine were a topless woman, that would be different. Hey, Jackman! Hugh Jackman! Play that variant on Wolverine. Logan as a topless woman. Although, you know what? That Hugh Jackman is really talented. He could probably pull it off. I don't like Black Superman. Now, I don't like Black Suit Superman. And that's something I kind of had to contend with as far as Superman number 17 is concerned. This issue is yet another tie-in with the Absolute Power event comic, where Superman has been depowered, and thus he's wearing the black suit for some reason. But he and Zatanna are teaming up to go look for magical reinforcements to go up against Amanda Waller and her forces. I'm of the opinion that the black Superman costume only works in a post-Death of Superman resurrection context. I don't think it's ever really worked at any other point since the Death of Superman. And even in that Return of Superman storyline, it only kind of worked. Remember when they gave Superman guns to use? Yeah, that was fantastic. I would actually prefer Superman in street clothes more than Superman in the black suit. I don't really like either, but if I had to pick one, I'd go with street clothes. But even though I'm not a huge fan of the black suit, Jamal Campbell continues to hit the art out of the park on this Superman series. He does the art, the inks, and the colors. Incidentally, I recently discovered Far Sector, the Green Lantern book that Jamal Campbell worked on as part of the Young Animal imprint at DC. Really tremendous work. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Superman gets into something of a bar fight in this issue, at the end of which he lectures the bar patrons on not doing their part against Amanda Waller and her forces of evil. Kinda hokey, but it sort of feels in character for Superman, doesn't it? So, I can't fault it.